Hello and welcome to the Universal Connector series. This video is part 3 titled Separator/Email. I recommend, if you haven't done so already, checking out parts 1 and 2 of the Universal Connector how-to series. As mentioned in part 2, there are many different mapping types to choose from. In this video, we're going to focus on the separator signal type. Separator type is a signal that uses a single character to separate the fields within the signal. So, for example, if a signal is received with a transmitter ID, event code, area, zone, and point ID, all separated by a hyphen, then that hyphen would be selected as your separator. Now for this demo, I have a separator signal type being sent in via email. So we're going to need to use the Universal Connector and set up an email connector. Then we're going to do data mapping for that signal, set up a line driver, and then we're going to set up a receiver line prefix, and then set up the customer transmitter. So to begin, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. And you can see I have my bold media gateway opened up. So over here to the far left under Universal Connector, I'm going to click on Connector and type in my password. We're going to come up here to Add, give it a name. I recommend putting the number on the end like that. For when you have to set up multiple email connectors, all you have to do is just add a 2 or a 3 at the end there. So next, the connector type. You can see mine's already set up at email, but you want to make sure that it is because you do have all these other options. And then OK. So that's going to go ahead and populate the fields that I need to fill out for my email server. This email account is specific to you. It's where your customers' emails are going to be sent to. So if you do not have this information, I do recommend partnering up with your IT department, and they should have this information. So in part 1 series video, we go over setting up a connector. So for this demo, I'm just going to stay specific to this demo. So the first thing is this common servers. We're actually not using one of these email accounts, so I don't need to worry about it. But we are using a POP3. So in format type, I'm going to select POP3 and then put in my server information. And I can go ahead and copy and paste this over into the SMTP server. And you'll notice when I selected that POP3 up here in the drop-down, it automatically defaulted the port information. So that's pretty handy. So next is going to be the email account, so the address. Okay, and these next two fields are going to be for if you were to send out email. It's not a very common thing to do, so you'll probably notice sometimes copying and pasting the address and filling in these two blanks. But for the demo, I kind of wanted to show you exactly what you would need to fill out. So the email username, that's going to be the name that's going to be on the email that's sent out. So for me, I'm just going to put Bold Technologies. You could put your company name there too. And the email from will be that same email address because it's the address that it's coming from. The next thing is going to be the password, and this is going to be the password used to gain access to that account. Alright, so now all I have to do is update. And then to test, we're going to hit the test button and make sure that there's a connection. You should receive this connection successful pop-up. If you do get an error, just go back and make sure there aren't any typos. Sometimes that's the most common problem. So just OK. So now we have our connector set up. The next thing we're going to want to do is make sure that we have a UC send or UC email menu created or imported. So over here to the far left, again, under menu items, you're going to want to come and look for that UC send, or again, yours may say UC email menu. Now this should already be set up for you. So if for whatever reason you can't find it or it's not created, go ahead and contact us and we'll get that set up for you. So you can right click on here and come down to component properties. And this is just going to give you the information on it. So it's going to show you the field set and the signal that is set up in here. So you can say OK. But basically it's going to be sending in a signal using the mapped fields and then end the session. So once you've made sure that you have this menu in here, we're now going to need to do some data mapping for that signal. So again, data mapping under UniversalConnector. And we're going to go to add and then give it a name. Just to stay consistent, I'm going to call this email 1 as well. And then OK. So now we need to select the mapping type. So again, like we said, this is a separator signal, but there are these different signal options down here. So just keep it at separator. And then the separator is that hyphen. So come down here. Yours may be a comma, whatever the separator is, you're going to come down here and find it. Next is the signal type. You notice in our email, it was a BA event code. So just a regular signal. But you also have a GPS signal, which is going to be sending in coordinates. And this would be something that you'd have to be licensed for. The next one is the telemetry. Now, telemetry sends in more measurable data, so like the temperature and things like that. So we're just going to select regular signal. And then our event type. So this needs to match with what you have in Manitou. So again, with that email that we have, it's a BA. So in our situation, it's going to be a SIA, just a traditional SIA event type. We also have SYS, which is going to be the Manitou standard code. So in Supervisor Workstation, when you go to your event codes, you'll notice the codes with the asterisk in front of it. That's going to be those system event types. The other one, of course, is that CID. So for this example, I guess for a burglary, it'd be like an E130. So ours is just SIA. The next thing we need to do is tell it where to find our data, where to find our signal. So ours is all in the body. So we would just keep this one checked where it says add current message body to final signal. Sometimes you'll have the transmitter ID though in the subject. So you'd want to select the add subject to start the final signal. And again, these can be moved around once you highlight them with the up and down arrows. So it depends on what your signal looks like. The next thing we need to do is come down here to the mapping fields. Now that we've told where to find the signal, we need to let it know what those mapped fields mean. So I'm going to open up that email again to kind of give you a visual of what I mean by this. So you'll notice here we have our first position is the transmitter. Second position is going to be the event code. Third is going to be the area. Fourth is the zone. And then that fifth position is going to be the transmitter ID. I apologize. It's going to be the point ID. So what we need to do is tell it just that. So if you click in here in position, I'm going to go ahead and use my keyboard and just type in the number 1 for the first position, tab over, and I'm going to do the letter M to pull up that mapped field. Now you have a drop down here. You can see there are other options. And again, in that part 2 video, we go over data mapping a little bit more detailed as well. But ours, it's just a mapped field. All right, and we said that the field is a transmitter ID. So there's your first position. So if I come down here, I'm just gonna keep filling this out. So the number 2, tab over, letter M, was the event code. Position 3 was the area. Zone. And then that last one, that position 5, letter M for mapped field, was the point ID. All right, so we have our name of our data map, which is email. We let it know what type of signal it is. It's a separator. What the separator is, what type of signal, the event type, where to find the signal, in what order, and then what the fields are exactly. So we're going to do a file save, and we're going to save that data map. So now that we have that set up, the next thing we need to do is come over here to our line drivers. Now the line driver Dropbox should now have our connector that we just created, so that email 1. Next we're going to put in our description. This is not a requirement, it's just a recommendation, but it is helpful when you do have those multiple email connectors set up. You can come in here to the line drivers and see right away which ones are connected and which ones are not connected. And if you put in the email address, then you can see exactly which one it is. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in the description. All right, and then our line function is going to be that universal connector. And then properties. So click inside the properties, make sure it's highlighted, right click, and select properties. So here, if we click in the field set, we have a drop down. Now this is going to be the data map that we created. So first we selected the connector, and then now the data map. Our FEP is going to be 1. That receiver is going to be 4, 5, line 2, and then the menu is going to be that UC send. Now that line 2 is important to remember this for when we go in and set up our receiver line map. These need to match, and that will make more sense when we get to that section in Supervisor Workstation. But make sure you whatever this is set to, your line 2 or 3, whatever one it is, that it's set up the exact same way in Supervisor Workstation under your receiver line map. So go ahead and select OK. And then again, we can do a file save. So we have our connector set up, we data mapped our signal, and we set up our line driver. So now, as far as the media gateway section of this goes, we are complete. So what we have to do to finalize that, besides saving it like we have been doing, you're going to want to come down here to reload and restart all devices. This is going to update everything with all that we just added. So now, like I was mentioning before, in Supervisor Workstation, we're going to need to set up the receiver line prefix. So under Maintenance, Setup, and then Receivers, you'll see here the receiver line prefix. If we expand that, we have a couple here. Now, the important thing to note is why we're setting up another receiver line prefix and why do we have multiple. And that is so that we can reuse transmitter ID numbers. So for example, if you already have a customer's cell phone number set up as an Instant Connect cell phone number, then you wouldn't be able to use that same cell phone number again if you were to set up an SMS receiver or transmitter, because you can't duplicate those numbers. However, if you have a separate receiver line prefix, you can. So as long as it's in a different receiver line prefix, you can use that same number. So all I'm going to do here is click and highlight receiver line prefix, make sure I'm in Edit, and select Add. All right, and the receiver line prefix will be UC, and that description is going to be UniversalConnector. And we're just going to keep the number to add just 1. Say OK. And you'll see that right down here we have a UniversalConnector receiver line prefix. So now we need to come up to that receiver 4 like we put in our media gateway line driver. And if we expand that, see we already have that line 1, so we need to create that line 2. And this is what I was talking about earlier. You need to make sure whatever line you choose when setting up your line driver matches with the receiver line map here in your Supervisor Workstation. So highlight receiver 4 and add as well. And that prefix is going to be that UniversalConnector. And give a description, again, UniversalConnector. there's that starting number 2. So again, make sure that 2 matches, and the number add is just going to stay at 1. Say OK. We're going to do a save. Yes, and there you have it. So now we need to go into the customer and operator workstation, pull up your customer or the account you're working on, and we're going to come over here to systems, and now we need to set up that another transmitter. So we already have one, so now we're going to set up a second one. So if you click and highlight transmitter, make sure you're in edit and do add. That transmitter number is going to be 2, just the next one, and that description we can go ahead and put email 1 and say OK. So now with this transmitter, for the customer side, the transmitter type is going to just be the default transmitter type. The receiver line prefix is going to be UniversalConnector. And that transmitter ID, if you remember back to our email, was 1234. And save. Say OK. Now before we get into testing this out, I wanted to go back into that supervisor workstation, and I wanted to show you those event types that we were talking about with the sys, SIA, and CID when setting up that data map. So maintenance, and coming down here to events, and event maps. So as long as the event code and event map are set up in here in Manitou, and they match what you put in the bold and the media gateway. So if you were to create a new one, so if it's one like for example CID, if you needed to create a new one, you would have to make sure it was set up here under the event maps and in the event code so that you can then put it into your bold media gateway. So those just need to match up and be translated. So that's where you'd find this for the CID, and then also that SIA. And here we have that BA. So those match. Now those system event codes, again, maintenance, events, event codes, those are going to be, and if I scroll down here a little bit, all of these with the asterisk in front of them. These are going to be those system event types. So if we chose system and the media gateway while we were doing our data mapping, we would have been wrong because this is a star BA and not just BA. So I wanted to point that out and kind of clarify that. So jump in here, make sure they match, or if you need to create a new event type, do it in here first before you go and set up the bold media gateway portion. Okay, so open up our email. We're going to go ahead and send this off. And that's correct, we do not have a subject. Minimize this. I'm going to go back over to our operator workstation and pull up that alarm queue. And here it is on the very top row. We have that BA event code, area 1, zone 1. You see our transmitter ID, UniversalConnector is our receiver line prefix, and then that point ID is that front door. So far everything looks good, so we can go ahead and double click on it. And then your operator would handle it just the same. So that D for do, go through and contact the customer, contact the police, and then the customer key holder, and then close it out. So we have just successfully set up our email connector and sent in that separator signal type, and to have it populate an alarm to our operator. This concludes part 3 of the UniversalConnector series, our separator/email video. You can find our upcoming videos at boldgroup.com. Just go to the bottom of the page for quick access to our YouTube page. For more information, contact your account executive today at sales@boldgroup.com.